So let's start at the beginning, Nick. What is your experience in politics so far?
So I've been involved in politics for quite a long time now, always as a sort of volunteer or a councillor or a candidate. My first election was 2010 in Lambeth, in a heavily Labour area that we never expected to win, and we didn't. But it was a fascinating experience and taught me a lot about how to campaign. And how to construct local campaigns. The following year, I was elected as a councillor in Kent, which is where I'm from originally. And I served for 4 years. I was chairman of the Transport Committee. I was the retailers champion. And that was a really interesting experience. Then 2018, I stood in Kingston for Berrylands Ward. It was actually, when I stood, it was the 10th most marginal ward in London. When I finished with it, it wasn't particularly marginal, I have to say. But again, an amazing experience and wonderful to be able to campaign on behalf of residents. I don't think that I can talk about what I've done in politics without saying a bit about why I do it. And there's a Muhammad Ali quote that I absolutely love, which is, service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth. And that idea of public service and standing up for your community is something I take seriously.
Amazing. So what has been your high point in politics so far then?
Well, actually, my high point is nothing to do with politics, but it's something that has really informed how I've tried to act as a local politician. And that was when I became a special constable in the Metropolitan Police. I come from a policing family. I grew up listening to my granddad's war stories of being an officer in the Ministry of Defence Police, actually, he was in. And it was always something I wanted to do. And it's that, actually, I was listening to your Behind the Badge podcast recently. It was an excellent show. And the officers talk about wanting to make a difference in the most basic way sometimes. And that's what drew me to being a special constable. I cannot say that I was some great super cop. My husband and I were watching a American police show recently, and this guy goes out on his first shift ever, and he has this incredibly dramatic shift, ends in this huge shootout. And my husband looked at me because on my first shift, I ran into a lamppost. So it was quite a different experience. But it's an experience I'd highly, highly recommend. If you want to serve your community, be a special constable.
Fantastic. And then time for a little bit more of a brutal question, I'm afraid. So what has been your biggest failure in politics so far? Or if you want to look at it in a nicer way, biggest learning point so far?
Yeah, we don't talk about failures, we talk about learning points, don't we? Development opportunities. I guess if I had to choose one particular failure or learning point from politics, it would be my 2010 council campaign in Lambeth. I've mentioned heavily Labour area. We didn't expect to win, but it was my first election. I threw everything I had into it. And so losing, even though it was expected, was still hard. But I took away the lesson that win or lose, if you can come out of a campaign and think, I fought for my community, I stood up for my residents, I stood up for the things I believe in, and I fought a campaign that I can be proud of, then that's still a victory.
Of course. And now a nice easy one. Why should voters vote for you?
Well, the London Assembly deals with a huge range of things, but the two biggest things it deals with are transport and policing. And on both of those subjects, I feel like I've been there, I've done it, and I've been at the sharp end of both those things. Whether it's transport, I've managed Waterloo Station on a Friday night when it's all going disastrously wrong and it's overcrowding and you're having people shouting at you. I know what that feels like. As a special constable, I patrolled the streets of central London and gained a direct insight into what it's like to be a police officer out there. Also emergency planning, which I want to, if I'm on the Assembly, I want to put that right at the top of the agenda because we've seen just how important that can be. Often it's an academic exercise, but my job involves, as an incident controller, basically dealing with emergencies and disasters and things that are going horribly wrong and trying to solve those problems and get them back on there. So all these things I would like to bring to the Assembly to be an informed voice, standing up for my residents. And also I want to be a community champion, which is something I try and do in my spare time. So my husband and I set up TEDx Kingston to give a platform for local people with interesting stories to tell. I set up 2 little free libraries in my community because I have a big love of books and learning, and I want to share that with the community. Also, I am an intensely reasonable person, or at least I try to be. I really have little time for this political partisan tit for tat that you see on Twitter. That absolutely bores me. I think it's not constructive.
Fantastic. And then just finally, give us a little fact about you the voters may not know.
This is quite random, but when I was 14, I flew the Goodyear blimp for an hour. I've got a little model in case anyone's struggling to visualize what that is.
How did that come about?
Well, I am, as you may have guessed, I'm a bit of a geek. And when I think it must have been 6 or 7 years old, an airship flew over my school. And I was absolutely transfixed. I stood there watching this thing fly over. And that sparked a lifelong passion for airships and aviation in general. And I think my dad actually wrote to Goodyear and said, "Look, do you think he can have a go?" And so we got a flight, and the pilot at one point said, "Right, you can have a turn now." I was like, "Get out of my way! I'm right there." And it was amazing, absolutely amazing.
Online at riversideradio.com on your smart speaker.
Play Riverside Radio.
And now on DAB Digital Radio.